CNN.
One of the Russian billionaires facing sanctions over Putin's war in Ukraine is now publicly shaming the invasion. Oleg Tinkov, writing on Instagram in Russian, quote, "I don't see a single beneficiary of this insane war. Innocent people and soldiers are dying. Generals waking up with a hangover have realized that they have a shit army. Of course, there are idiots that write the letter Z, but there are about 10% idiots in all countries. 90% of Russians are against this war." So switching into English at the end of his post with an appeal to the West, he writes this: "Give Mr. Putin a clear exit to save face and stop this massacre." Let's discuss now. Brooke Harrington is here to talk about it. She is a professor of sociology at Dartmouth College who studies oligarchs. Brooke, good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining. So I'm wondering what you think of this, because the whole post is scathing. Tinkoff is incredibly pointed in his criticism of the army. He goes on to say, "And how will the army be good if everything else in the country is shit and dirty and nepotism?" I mean, that's an attack on the government and Putin. So how is he likely to react?
Yeah, it's an incredibly bold move. And I think it's the sort of thing that an oligarch from Russia would only do if they knew that it was all over but the shouting. So Tinkoff was never one of the very, very close oligarchs to Putin. So he has somewhat more freedom to speak, but this is a very new thing for any oligarchs to be doing. The last guy who really tried criticizing Putin at this level got clapped into prison for 10 years and had his assets seized by the state. So I think someone like Tinkoff would only dare do this if he thought that Putin was essentially powerless to punish him. And the image of Tinkoff basically begging for mercy for Putin from the West, asking the West to be humanitarian, asking the West to help Putin save face. I mean, that's not a great look for a strongman like Putin. It must be kind of humiliating for him.
Will any number of Russian elites speaking out change Putin's course? I mean, does anyone have his ear at this point?
I don't think their function is to influence him. My sense is that their role has always been to do his bidding, and in return, he allows them to enjoy this fabulous wealth, which they then use to hobnob with the elites of the West to try and bend them and Western institutions to serve Russia's interests. So it's not that they influence him, but if they feel safe enough to criticize Putin publicly, they must know that he is considerably weakened compared to where he was, say, back in January.
Yeah. I think when you're talking about, you may have been talking about the former oligarch Mikhail Khodorkovsky. Is that the one you said who ended up in prison for 10 years for speaking out? And then there's also, right, the prominent, which we were running a special on, Alexei Navalny, poisoned, right, and is in prison right now after he returned to Russia. So is there a real risk to this? There is, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that the oligarchs have not dared to do for almost 2 decades. What started in the immediate aftermath of the invasion of Ukraine and the imposition of sanctions were these little kind of mild peeps by Tinkov and people like Oleg Deripaska saying, maybe this invasion isn't such a great idea. Even that was an amazing step, indicating that there was far more dissension around Putin than Putin himself would have liked us to think. And now to have someone just boldly coming out and saying, okay, everybody, just knock it off and give this poor defeated strongman some kind of face-saving win. Wow, that's got to be a tough burn for Putin. And I wouldn't want to be Oleg Tinkov right now, because I'm sure Putin won't take kindly to being portrayed as someone who needs to save face to the West.
I got to ask you about this, because he's saying that the vast majority of Russians are against the war in Ukraine. I mean, he's saying like 90%. There are 10% idiots in our country, but 90% of the people are against it. Is there any evidence of that?
That struck me as optimistic.
To say the least.
Yeah.
That's it. Just optimistic. There's no evidence. I mean, because what the official polls, at least that we've shown and we've seen, it's somewhere in the 80 percentile, the high 70s, low 80 percentile of people who believe, that this war is justified.
Right. I mean, from what I've read, it seems that when people are polled in Russia about whether they support the invasion of Ukraine, the majority do say they support it, but who knows if that's what they really believe, or who knows what information they actually have in this tightly controlled autocratic environment. So it's hard to know, I think, for an outsider what support, if any, Russians really have for this invasion of Ukraine. But 90% oppose it seems, well, as I said, really optimistic.
Thank you, Brooke. I appreciate it.
Sure. Take care.
So as we just mentioned here, what happens to people who stand up to Putin? Make sure you tune in to the Sunday